I think most people in the room know where Summit Lake is. It's just south of Akron. The highway bifurcates what is a thriving and improving community from downtown, and for the Ohio Erie Canalway and the towpath trail, there is a very strong multimodal connection that really runs along the shore of Summit Lake. And what I would like to offer is that it is an amazing community that has amazing people. It's just been forgotten. We have collectively turned our backs on neighborhoods like Summit Lake. I don't want to lecture, I don't want to go into it, but now is the time to continue to invest. And Ohio Erie Canalway Coalition, Dan Rice and his team, the Knight Foundation, Civic Commons, there have been a lot of people that are focusing in and around that neighborhood. And as such, we were really blessed to start this work with a head start. In early conversations with the AMATS team, with the two Mats. So if you guys can't remember the names, just go with Matt and AMATS, it's super easy. But really started us in the right direction with that discovery document. So Heather didn't really give a hard sell on the connecting communities. If you are a municipality in this audience and you have the ability to do it, do it. AMATS is there with you. They help create some of the supporting documents. From the consultant perspective, that discovery document means that we can start right away. And we aren't spending time doing a ton of research in the demographics and some of the existing conditions. I wish more folks did that in preparation for this work. So as such, we did not do a ton of community engagement off of the rip because we had plans and plans and plans and decades of plans that had been in and around Summit Lake, so we kind of knew the answers to the quiz before the quiz was asked. And so where we started with, we got the beat on this. You're not the only one that can put animated GIFs, GIFs, whatever the hell we're calling them, into your presentation, all right? So we can get started right away. And so part of our initial charge was stop asking and stop doing. I personally have made the mistake of asking a community, showing up to a community in a community process, say, hey, what would you like to see in your community? And they say, I've already told you, or whoever else that was here 10 times before this, stop asking me this. So let's roll up our sleeves and let's get to work. Shout out to Dylan, I saw Michelle DeFiore, Kyle, other folks from the city who also helped us get this done as quickly as we could as far as starting. So we started looking at missing connections. I'll spare you the whole diatribe of what that means. But really what we found is that there are amazing resources that kind of underscore that. And there are real legit safety concerns in this neighborhood, specifically vehicular violence that happens through speeding, lack of crosswalks, and just lack of overall kind of visibility that happens. And so if you can imagine, folks want to get to the lake, it's beautiful, it's been cleaned up, it's now very much a recreational asset and amenity. If you can't cross Lake Boulevard, like, it kind of sucks. And to Kate's earlier presentation about the youngest and the most vulnerable of our neighbors that are really challenged with some of those questions, this was something that we wanted to dig into. So we really jumped really quickly to the key connections and really understanding where the missing pieces were and how we could then address those as part of this plan. It wasn't enough to say, hey, you have a problem. It was enough to say, we've heard you previously, you have these problems, and these are potential solutions that we can offer to get there. In this work, I think because of the work that AMATS does and because of that pre-planning, we were able to kind of take a step back and do a little bit bigger, deeper dive into what this work can be. So the Leslie Note Project Preparedness Super System, we created what we refer to as the Traffic Calming Toolkit. This is a little bit of a pitch. If you guys want to have a demonstration of this, reach out to me. I'd be happy to kind of walk you through this. But what we did is we created a series of criteria that are, let me ask this. Show of hands. This is a little bit of participatory, all right? Show of hands. How many traffic engineers are there? Higher than that, come on. Don't be so ashamed of that road, that Curtis. All right, planners, architects. Ooh, we're outnumbered. It's actually intermingled much more than I kind of thought it was going to be. I thought we were going to look at like an 8th grade school dance situation where there's one side over here and one side over there. This toolkit was really intended to bridge the gap between the two. So working with Dylan and others in the planning department, it was, what are the series of criteria? What are some of the data sets that we have? And then how do we create a series of kind of a menu list of how much some of the low cost, no cost stuff can be, some of the larger implementations. Kate talked about the speed cushions and other kind of pieces that are being implemented in Columbus and throughout the region. The city of Akron has some of these tools at their disposal. And we really wanted to create a situation or a scenario or a tool of, hey, this is how you can decide what happens where. And so it's not enough to dream at the planning stage, it's data-driven decisions as informed through the engineers at the city to say, hey, look, if we have these conversations throughout this planning process, and then we prioritize these things, do we really have to relitigate the validity of it when it comes time to implement? And it was a really key moment for us to give this kind of step-by-step kind of piece of it. So again, it's too much to go into right now. It's dynamic, you put in different criteria, it'll filter down and ultimately gets you, hey, consider these 3 things on these 3 types of streets. If you want a demonstration, like I said, we can. All right, so actionable impact back to Summit Lake. Here we go, let's party. You guys, come on now, you do better than that. You better than that. All right. What we looked at was near-term, short-term, and then what's immediate thing. So I'm just going to walk very, very quickly high level. These are deliverables that came out of this work. So again, they weren't fully engineered by any stretch of the imagination, but they went very far beyond kind of aspirational renderings and those types of things. Like these are trying to meet as many of the criteria as we know of, and kind of that near-term, short-term, and then kind of looking at what it could be in the future, right? I was challenged to work in a lyric into today, so what I would say is, take me on this journey. Because in the future we can have streetlights, people walking down the boulevard. All right, that's it. And then also what we looked at is other streets and neighborhood streets throughout, ways that we can implement this. I told you it wasn't going to be overly serious. And then really what those action items can be. And I hope that this leaves some of the deliverables, some of the displays, some of the exhibits, it leaves with a clear direction that we can implement rather quickly when we have a strong foundation, partnering with AMATS, partnering with the City of Akron, partnering with Summit Lake residents, hearing them, listening to them, and then our charge is to get it done. People don't want to have another conversation about what could be. Let's get this stuff done, and let's have more of this happening within our communities where it's safe, where it feels like that everybody is welcome. Because I think that's part of our charge. So that's Summit Lake in a nutshell. Happy to answer any questions when we get to the panel. Thank you guys.
Here we go. This is what I wanted to see. Josh Slaga is a principal at OHM Advisors with over 16 years of experience on transportation and infrastructure projects in Ohio. He works closely with public agencies to plan, design, and fund capital improvements ranging from small maintenance projects to large-scale corridor upgrades. His collaborative approach and broad experience have advanced safe, sustainable, and resilient infrastructure across the region. Please join me in welcoming Josh Slaga to the podium.
Thank you, everyone. And I do have to start off that I am an engineer. I hope Curtis doesn't hold that against me. And engineers are good people too, so. We're here to talk about the State Route 619 corridor study in the city of New Franklin, funded through the National Communities Grant. And this grant was an incredible opportunity for the city to really develop that vision and create meaningful progress to improve this corridor. It's something that I know has been in front of mind for a lot of residents in New Franklin, so it's great to finally have that seed money to start this process, which hopefully can lead to a large-scale re-envisioning of the corridor. This application started from this area serving as really a gateway into the city and also the Portage Lakes region. We wanted to make sure that there would be a good first impression when you come to New Franklin, creating that sense of place. But we also wanted to solve the issues of a lack of pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure. So the study looked to aim to solve some of those situations, as well as looking at how do you improve safety, how do you strengthen that identity of the community, protect the natural resources, and then also position for long-term economic success. We approached the study using both, using more than just engineering. We wanted to make sure that we had the planning, design, and lastly, then coming with the engineering principles, making sure that all the ideas the community has brought to us were aligned with practical and actionable items and next steps. So rather than leading with those constraints, we listened first. We talked to business owners, we had steering committee meetings, we made sure that the residents and community leaders were heard, and we wanted to make sure we understood what they valued and what they wanted to see in the project. So then when we moved into engagement, the city just went through a very robust comprehensive plan process. We wanted to build upon that. So instead of having those large-scale public meetings, we wanted to make sure that we come to the community to avoid that public meeting fatigue. And that's where we were able to show up at community events such as the Music by the Lake series, and then have a survey at the end to really make sure that we're capturing everybody where they were. This engagement allowed us to create a corridor framework that we were able to use and set the strategy for this. The State Route 619 corridor in New Franklin is over or about a mile long from State Street to the City of Green border in the Portage Lakes region, and really had three distinct segments from, if you're familiar with the area, there's a golf course and the channel to a more commercial core, and then as you start heading to the west, you get to a more residential rural feel. So we had to come up with a framework that would work for all of the segments, but still create some continuity throughout everything. Here's an example of one of the frameworks that we developed. This is at the commercial core. You can see some of the design principles that we work with. Mid-block crossings, as we've heard a couple of times today, how important they are. There's businesses on both sides of the street. We want to make sure that people can flow from one side to the other safely. The shared use path starts to create that bikeable community that the city desired, with sidewalks on both sides. And then you start seeing the landscape buffers from the parking lot. If you're familiar with this area, there's a lot of wide driveways with limited access management, parking sometimes in the city right away. We wanted to make sure we started to clear that up and create boundaries and borders for everyone and make it a welcoming place. With that corridor, or with that framework plan, we're able to develop a specific corridor plan for this area. And it looks great, and it's all one large corridor that would be great to implement in one swoop. That'd be over $10 million. So we knew we needed to start breaking it into implementable plans. And that's where you start seeing all these different segments work together to create something that it's going to be a long-term vision it'll take to get there, but we think we have a path forward to do it. We do want to highlight a couple of things with this plan. One of them is going to be the two roundabouts you see. And I know the one's really small at the Boston Avenue intersection, but this really came from public engagement. When we started the process, there wasn't a large appetite for roundabouts, but as we moved on, we really heard from the community that that intersection's a problem. Could you evaluate a roundabout there? And we found that it's something that could work and it could fit and serve a lot of the things the community want to see, from traffic calming, the ability to get in and out of the side street, and also start creating that bookend to the commercial core, to the other gateway roundabouts you see at the far right of your screen. This might be a later phase, and it could be several years before you see something like this implemented. But it's starting to show that public engagement, listening, and bringing those plans can create even bolder, more dynamic visions than we even initially thought. And we also wanted to look at this corridor. You see in the purple, it's just a small part of the city and the overall region. But we really saw this as an opportunity to connect New Franklin to the greater region. They have such great assets as the Towpath Trail, the Portage Lakes, State Park, which has a visitor center with a ribbon cutting today at 1 o'clock, as the mayor said. So it's growing, and we want to make sure that all of this can start connecting together. And that's when we see a long-term plan of how does this work and how does this fit into the bigger regional context. But we wanted to make sure that this plan would lead the city with a plan of how can you think bigger beyond just this one corridor. It's something that could be a vision for 10, even 20 years down the road. So what we were able to do with this plan is start creating that vision from what you see today is a very car-centric and dominated corridor to something that starts creating a sense of place for this community and really has that welcoming aspect as you get into New Franklin, that you're there and start to create that brand and identity. It also brings in the bike paths and starts setting a framework, not just what can be built with this project, but as future developments continue to come online in the city of New Franklin, it positions it for getting that overall greater vision. So, this study was instrumental in starting to set that vision. I know there's always ideas floating around in the head, but until you start to get down on paper, it's hard to move forward. And with this, we're able to create this, and more importantly, start creating the action plan on how to move forward. So, with that, I'd like to hand it back over to our director.
Thank you, Josh. And now I invite the remaining panel members on the stage. There we go. Dylan Garatano is a city planner with the City of Akron's Long Range Planning Division, where he focuses on community-driven planning, neighborhood revitalization, and sustainable infrastructure. Since 2017, he has played a leading role in plans for the neighborhoods of Kenmore, Middlebury, University Park, and Summit Lake, as well as Akron's Bike Network. Dylan earned a political science degree from the University of Mount Union and studied urban and regional planning at the University of Minnesota's Humphrey School of Public Affairs. Mayor Paul F. Adamson graduated from the University of Akron with a degree in education and taught in Akron Public Schools for 8 years before earning a law degree. Paul was a trial attorney in Akron for 36 years prior to becoming mayor of New Franklin in 2018, a position he still holds. Prior to becoming mayor, Paul served 16 years as a trustee and councilman in New Franklin. During those years, he held various board positions, including his current position as chairman of the Summit County Public Health District Advisory Board. AMATS Planning Administrator Matt Stewart will be leading this discussion. Please join me in welcoming Dylan, Mayor Adamson, and Matt.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Is this on? Oh, switch on the top. There we go. All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Heather, for the introduction. It's my great pleasure to be here moderating another panel discussion this year. And the reason I'm so excited about it is these 4 people, you've heard from 2 of them already, but I think you're going to find that they're all passionate and very interested in what they do. And hopefully you've kind of seen that demonstrated how much they care about the communities that they're working for and working to improve. So thank you, panel members. And so what we're going to do for the next 20 or 25 minutes is kind of have an abbreviated panel discussion where we're just going to dive a little bit deeper into both of these recent planning grants. So why don't we just get to it here, and we'll start at the beginning. And I'd like to talk first about a little bit about how each project came to be and why you were interested in applying for Connected Communities. So I'm going to start with you, Dylan. And as Alex laid out, there has been a lot of recent investment in the Summit Lake neighborhood, and a lot of other planning efforts have preceded this and helped build momentum. So this does seem like a logical place to conduct a Connected Communities study. But were there any other factors that went into choosing to apply for Summit Lake? Or maybe another way to ask this is, why was planning grant the next logical step in this process? And how did the planning grant continue moving the process along?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Matt. So, in the 8 years that I've been working with the City of Akron, Summit Lake, the neighborhood, it really has become such a focal point for different plans. And I would say 5 years ago, when AMHA was awarded Choice Neighborhoods grants and conducted their transformation plan, we also concurrently with the City of Akron conducted a land use plan in the neighborhood. And one of the goals of that land use plan really was to reestablish trust and transparency, which is something that kind of over time had evaporated in the neighborhood. With that planning process, one of the recurring messages and themes that the residents spoke to us was that they just really don't feel safe walking in their neighborhood. I think that this Connected Communities Planning Grant is a natural extension of that, and people want, like Alex said, people want to see action. So this allowed us that technical opportunity to take a look at the streets in the neighborhood to see what kind of improvements could be implemented pretty quickly.
Okay, thanks, Dylan. Similar question for you, Mayor Adamson. Basically, why and how was the decision made to focus on making that part of the city more walkable, connected, innovative? So basically, why connecting communities and why now?
Well, first of all, I'm going off script immediately because I want to say this. This whole community connection thing was so awesome for us. And blessings to AMATS for putting this together. And I look out in this room and I see that we are all in this thing together. What's good for New Franklin is good for Stowe. What's good for Stowe is good for Talmadge. What's good for the city of Akron is good for all of us. I feel so strongly about that, and I'm so thrilled that it's happening over at Summit Beach because I've lived here long enough. I went to Summit Beach Park. There used to be an amusement park there. all right? And then I worked at Firestone, and I watched Firestone dump all the junk into Summit Lake. And then I saw Summit Lake reclaimed, and I taught school over at South High School, and I know how important that area is to the people in that community. And so hats off for what you've done over there with Summit, at Summit Beach. For us out in New Franklin, when we're trying to connect communities, it just so happens that that intersection is right at the intersection of where the borders with Greene and Coventry Township. And so it was a natural for us in that sense. And then we need that gateway. You know, we're still a community that's struggling for an identity. We have 4 different school districts out there, and we're looking for ways to come together. And so there was a natural in that regard. The idea, we are very limited in our opportunities for residential and commercial development, as maybe some other communities are. We don't have a highway, and our infrastructure is slow. So this is an area that was right for us. This was identified as an area that made sense to us to try to get some planning for future development there. And so for all of those reasons, it just became a natural location for us when the opportunity presented itself. And it's been a real godsend for us out in New Franklin. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Okay, so we know connecting communities is all about creating safe and comfortable transportation options for all users. A lot of the stuff Kate was talking about fits in really well with the mission of connecting communities. So this next question is for our 2 consultants. Both of you have experience, and I'm going to say expertise, in planning these types of environments. And so what I want to ask is, what do you find are some of the most essential components for creating high-quality environments for pedestrians, bicyclists, and transit users? And then what about safe environments for those users? Does that change the answer at all? We can start with you, Alex.
All right, thanks, Matt. Can you guys hear me okay? It's like a tribunal. I think that the answer is the same for both high quality and safety. I think that you can't have a high quality environment without feeling safe for everybody that's there. I think specifically thinking about transportation and infrastructure, it has to feel safe from all modes of transportation. We've heard a lot about that today. So I think our approach, and I think the challenge, unless you guys are working in municipalities and have funding sources where you have an abundance of funding and you don't know how to spend it all, because you just have stacks and stacks of money, look for everything that you implement, every component of the street, every component of the intersection, to do at least 2 things. We don't have the luxury of having things be singular in use. Our resources are too strapped. So, Mayor, to your point of like that intersection, like, yeah, it's a safe way to move cars and people. It's also a gateway into the community. And so that's at least 3 things that intersection can do. And I think for Summit Lake, we were looking to see how we could increase safety, how we could improve perception through the infrastructure. And so everything that was recommended was extremely intentional and that it was multi-purpose.
Okay, thank you. Same question for you, Josh. Just what do you find to be the essential components of creating high quality and safe environments for non-vehicular users?
Yeah, I think safety is the first priority that we always want to start with when we're looking at these type of projects. But I think that high quality, if you start reading them together, that's when not only do you get a better environment that people want to be in, it becomes even safer. And I think important to that is starting to create connections. We don't want to build a trail just for the purpose of building a trail. We want to make sure that's going to connect people to where they are and where they want to go. Because that's the more people out there, you just create that safer environment. And I know starting to create those separations, and it's touched on in the earlier presentation that everyone, I think we all feel comfortable when we're using those trails for biking and walking, and we do have a buffer from the roadway. And that was something that we really looked at with the New Franklin project, was how do we create those buffers, and not just from the road, but also from parking lots. We had a lot of situations where the parking lots are right up against the right of way, or sometimes into the right of way. If we're to put that trail there, we still don't want cars parking right up against that. So creating those landscape buffers provide both that safety and create that high quality environment, and starting to go back to that, creating the identity for New Franklin.
Okay, thank you. So similar topic, we're still kind of talking about complete streets and making our streets more for people than for vehicles. So let's talk about this from the community perspective. So Dylan and Mayor Adamson, I'm wondering if you have any community pressure to modify the transportation network for bicycles, pedestrians, and transit users. Or was this really more an issue of community leaders seeing a need and wanting to improve transportation? Dylan, you can go ahead and go first.
Yes. I mean, thanks, Matt. So, I mean, it's definitely both. I mean, obviously, we can see that there's a problem in the neighborhood, and then the residents themselves were also expressing the same concerns. And then, you know, from all the planning efforts that we had done, you know, like I said, residents were saying loud and clear, we don't feel safe walking in our neighborhood. And so, you know, walkability is one of those things where it could be considered a luxury in some neighborhoods. But if you actually look and take a deep dive and think about what Summit Lake is, it's a neighborhood with a higher concentration of people that that live in a carless household. 1 in 3 of the residents are under the age of 18, and we know that fewer people are getting driver's licenses. So, you know, it's not a luxury in this neighborhood. Walkability is a necessity, and I think that really speaks volumes as to why something has to be done in this neighborhood. And like Alex showed, you know, Lakeshore Boulevard has been identified as such a barrier in the neighborhood. Because on the west side of the boulevard where the lake is, you have all the amenities. You have the community center, you have the nature center, and the towpath trail, but yet all the residents live on the other side of Lakeshore Boulevard and just don't have an easy way to get there. Yeah, they have to cross the street, but sometimes they feel like they're putting their life into their own hands, which is unacceptable and tells us that the status quo absolutely is not working and something has to be done.
Good answer. What about you, Mayor Adamson?
To give you some context, if you're familiar or maybe you're not, when we talk about the State Route 619 corridor, think about Turkey Foot Golf Course, which a lot of people know that landmark. That's at that intersection. Many of you may know about the upper deck. You may know it from that context. Which, a historical note, that actually was a stagecoach stop back in the 1800s. So there's a lot of history that goes back there. So in that area, it's sort of, you know, was there community pressure or did the leaders see a need for it? It was kind of both. I think the people who have been invested out there for a long time have always known what a jewel that could be. When we see what happens in some other lakes districts around the country, we see some really, some beautiful scenarios, but we don't have that out there. And then, but what we do have is traffic, foot traffic, bicycle traffic. People who are traveling, and we're going to have a whole lot more of that because you may be aware that there's a water line development. There's going to be about 170 homes come out there. And I'm sure all of them are going to have golf carts, and all of them are going to want to go up and down 619 and make it to some of the restaurants and the amenities there. So it really wasn't if we build it, they'll come. It's like they already came and we better build it. But in a sense, at least we feel like we're a little bit proactive as a result of the opportunity to be part of this process with this grant.
Let's stay on New Franklin for a moment. This question is for you, Josh, just kind of talking a little bit more about the community buy-in aspect of the plan. So New Franklin's previous comprehensive plan from a couple of years ago told the city loudly and clearly that there was a desire to create a sense of place and a more walkable environment along Route 619. Despite that, we saw some very significant changes in perspective during the New Franklin planning process. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about that and why you think that happened.
Yeah, at the first steering committee meeting, you know, we were a little concerning when we heard the feedback that, you know, will this actually fit? Can you actually do anything? There was some anti-roundabout feedback that we received, and we kind of took that back and, you know, how do we try to, you know, take that and actually create this high-quality environment? So we went to future meetings really focused on the education aspect. You know, we started at that very first meeting with more of a generic education of here's why roundabouts are great, here's why these sidewalks and bike paths are great, here's why you should have it. But it wasn't really until we started having those visuals to show here's how they actually fit and here's how they can connect to places. And here's why the roundabout works for this intersection. You know, we didn't convince everyone to love roundabouts, but at the end of the process they said, you know, I like a roundabout here. And, you know, as I touched on the presentation, they even said maybe even over here is good too. So I think that was really important of starting to take the messaging from more of that generic big picture of why something's good to why it's good for this project and this corridor, because we were trying to create a specific thing.
Okay, this sets us up nicely to talk a little bit about public involvement. I know at AMATS we recognize that this is pretty much an essential component of a good planning process. I think many of you in the audience recognize that too. And so I'd like to ask our two consultants, Alex and Josh, how did the process of public involvement help assure that things were moving in the right direction? And how did you tailor any involvement to build upon or complement previous public involvement instead of replicating it? And were there any challenges in getting public buy-in or even reaching out to the community? I know, Alex, you talked a lot about how there's that fatigue, like you don't want to go back and say like, well, what do they want? You've done that 10 times. So Alex, we'll start with you.
Sure, no, thanks, Matt. I think the most important thing and what I would share out and kind of the challenge is to not replicate engagement that has already been done. Do not ask the same questions again. Don't ask it. People want that affirmation that you heard them the first time. And so if there needs to be a clarity, if there needs to be a, hey, did we get it right? I would encourage you to phrase the question and kind of arrange the engagement kind of around that information seeking and affirmation, kind of listening back to the community. Specific with Summit Lake and the residents, Dylan talked about a lot of the planning work that has happened that kind of preceded the Connecting Communities grant. And so what we did is we reviewed all those plans, and all the consultants in the room do that, and all of the engineers do that, and all the planners in the room do that. What we did is we wanted to make sure that any recommendation that came out of this work could be tied back to earlier planning processes. And what we were trying to underscore is that the Summit Lake conversation is singular in nature. It may be spanning years and years and years, but when we talked about planning, and we were not at the table when those plans were drafted and created, but this is the resultant of some of that planning work. This is the implementation of some of the ideas that were really kind of sourced in that first round of engagement. So for us, it was trying to make sure that that conversation or series of conversations felt like it tied back. What we did is we arranged the Connecting Communities grant, or the plan, around some of the guiding principles of some of the earlier planning studies to, as we reported out, some of the recommendations, we could tie it back to that. As far as reaching out, we have learned, as I'm sure most people in this room know, that there is not a lot of appetite for community members to go to the church basement and talk about anything on a random Thursday night. So we don't do that if we want to actually have a conversation with folks. And so we show up at the Summit Lake Farmers Market, and we show up at the events, like I know Josh said you did as well. People are more interested to talk about what's happening in their city when they're enjoying things that are happening in their city or their neighborhood. It's a little cheat code, okay? So if you want to invite people, and I personally don't understand the rage around roundabouts, not for today. If you want to get people really upset about that, have a conversation in a church basement on a Thursday about roundabouts. If you're asking other voices to get involved with it, meet people where they already are, and it's a much easier conversation, and it's a way for the elected officials in the room to show that you're listening even when it isn't an official kind of meeting or listening session.
Okay. And a similar question for Josh, if you can talk a little bit about public involvement in New Franklin.
Yeah, the city already spent a significant amount of time and money on this comprehensive plan, so we wanted to build upon that. All that effort was already done. Let's continue that process. And I think really where you start to see momentum in that plan is when you have those big picture ideas in the comprehensive plan and you start turning them into actual concepts. And that's when you really get the buy-in from the people. They start trusting you that, okay, we've been heard once and now you're starting to actually craft it into something that we can implement. And I think that was really important for this process. Another interesting thing is the mayor mentioned there's a new development that's going on right adjacent to this development, was trying to separate the two. That development, as you know, any development sometimes can be controversial. But we weren't doing this because of that one development. We were doing this for the greater New Franklin. And I think keeping those things separated also allowed us to avoid some of maybe that negativity that might be around from the anti-development crowd. So I think keeping those two things in mind allowed us to have a successful public engagement process. And then at the end, we had an online survey to have a wide audience just to kind of confirm what we're hearing, to make sure that it wasn't just a select few people, because we did get very good feedback, positive feedback. We wanted to make sure that we'd be aware of any of those potential negative comments, so when the time does come to move forward, we can also implement those and make sure that we have full buy-in from the community.
Okay, so just a few more questions here. Now we're going to talk a little bit about final products. So both of these planning processes, I'm going to say, went really well, and we have plans that have been received by the community. And so we want to ask, starting with you, Mayor Adamson, what aspects, I know it's hard to pick just one, so notice I'm saying aspects. What aspects of the plan are you most excited about or proud of? And are there any successes from a process perspective that you hope to replicate?
First of all, a non-material benefit was the community buy-in that we experienced. And that was somewhat surprising. The water line development is very controversial in our city. And there used to be 27 holes out there, and they took the water line, and there were a lot of people who lived in that area who really didn't want to see that developed. And so there was a lot of negativity there. But when we got into this process, and we heard from the folks who live in that adjacent area, in fact, they were very excited about these types of, about bike lanes, and about a multi-use path, and about safety, and about roundabouts even. You know, and so that was so gratifying that once we really got out to the people, we found out that, you know, they didn't like this, but they like an awful lot of that. And going forward, what I think, you know, the safety components are going to be critical. We're going to see a whole lot more traffic there. The shared youth pass is going to be dynamic in that area, connecting some areas, because some of you may have been to Howie's before, I mean to Dusty's and Craftsman's Park, and we know there's going to be golf carts going back and forth between there and the golf course, etc. And then really, then that entry roundabout, that'll be the first phase of this project, and we're really excited about that. I think that really gives us an opportunity to have a true gateway. A lot of people were concerned about traffic coming off that new development. I think it's going to answer a lot of those questions. So those are the components that, at least at first blush, we're really excited about.
Yeah, okay. So it sounds like a lot of what you're excited about is just how the community came together, and then of course happy with the final result, so that's good. So similar question in Summit Lake. What are you most proud of, and can you talk a bit about some of the successes you'd like to replicate? I know Alex touched on the toolkit, so this question is for Dylan or Alex if you want to talk about a little more about that or anything else that you're excited about through the Summit Lake process.
Yeah, well, I'll jump in, and yeah, we definitely want to talk about the traffic calming toolkit. But I think I'll start with something that's relatable for everybody. Like, in this age of technology, what really sucks is like when you have to buy one specific thing that does one specific job. And with the Connecting Communities program, we got a planning grant for Summit Lake, but we got a toolkit that can be applied to every neighborhood in the city and beyond. And I think that's really cool. You know, in the public sector, we have a capacity issue, and we sometimes just don't have enough staff time to devote to the number of streets that we have in the city. Akron is a city of 64 square miles, and there's tons of streets in there, and there's even more different implementation devices for traffic calming. And so I think the traffic calming toolkit really, it's going to simplify that process, and it's just something that's really easy to use. And we're really lucky that the folks at City Architecture put something together so cool.
Anything to add, or did Dylan sum it up?
That was pretty damn good.
Sounded like a plug.
Yeah, it's almost like a plug. I mean, the thing beyond like the technical document and kind of where we landed with a heavy focus on implementation is spending time within the community, building those relationships with folks. And so the best part, selfishly, the best part of this work is being part of multiple conversations that are trying to lead to similar places of success, and having residents show up to future meetings saying, hey, I appreciate that you listen, and we're excited to get this stuff done. Mayor, to your point of like, it's not necessarily changing perceptions, but it's listening to folks and then reporting back to them and showing how they have helped guide this process. And I'll kind of underscore the traffic toolkit. We were very happy to develop that with the city of Akron. I think one of the best benefits of that is that it was developed with engineers and planners in the room. And so it wasn't a situation where, hey, this is what the planning department thinks is great, and then when the baton is passed to the engineering department or public works or whomever is charged with implementation or construction, that there's not a level of familiarity with it. So we essentially asked for, hey, what are the rules of engagement? What does this work need to satisfy? And then that's what really became foundational to the toolkit to help try to make some of those future decisions as easy as possible. Notice I didn't say they're easy, but I'm trying to make them as easy as possible.
Okay, and our last question. So we've talked, you know, what happened at the beginning of this process, what the final result looks like. Now let's talk about the future. So we have these, I'm going to say, great plans in both communities, and now it's time to implement them, which is always harder to do. So I guess the question for Dylan and for Mayor Adamson is, what are the first things you hope to accomplish, and are there challenges to making that happen soon? And then what role do transportation improvements play in making the community more vibrant or desirable? And we'll start with you, Mayor Adamson.
Let me first say what a wonderful job OHM did, and I also want to say what a wonderful job AMATS did. Matt and Heather, in helping us put this together and keep it together as we went down the track on that thing. And I would encourage everybody to keep applying for these grants. And I know in New Franklin we will consider using the same process even without the grant. In other words, self-funded. I mean, you guys already know this, but it was just such a critical, important tool for us, and a valuable tool for us. I mean, as far as next steps, we got to chase the money, just like everybody else. And I'm happy to say that this coming Wednesday, you'll have before council a resolution to proceed with the application for SDBG funding to try to get this started. And what it means to the community, again, we have very limited potential for commercial corridors. This really can become the crown jewel that we're looking for. You know, a springboard to development, commercial and residential, but as importantly, and I should have probably said this first, but the safety, because the numbers are going to come. We're going to have about 120 new houses out there, and there's going to be bikes, and there's going to be golf carts, and there's going to be walkers, and we need to have the facilities to make sure that those folks are safe, that add a couple more roundabouts and make sure the traffic flow is safe in and out of the businesses. So it's just really going to be a hallmark, I think, for the city of New Franklin, and I'm going to shut up before Curtis does that aging thing with my picture up there.
All right, Dylan, you have the last word here. First things you hope to accomplish, and what the challenges are to accomplish that.
I would echo a lot of what Mayor Adamson said. I mean, the implementation is obviously the #1 goal of any planner, and you know, we're really excited that I think this plan put a lot of people first in the design, and I think the folks at City Architecture did a great job. You know, and then going for, you know, additional funding, I think that's always the goal, to get the projects implemented. And so we were actually able to use our pedestrian master plan to help us secure a grant from the folks at Smart Growth America through their Community Connectors program. And just last week there was a press release that Akron was one of 3 cities awarded one of their implementation grants. So we're super excited about that, and you know, we're going to be working with some folks from Team Better Block and Stantec to kind of design a quick build project that can actually bring some of the plan that we put together to life. So stay tuned into the spring of next year.
All right, well, thank you so much to our panel members. You all did a great job. You made me look smarter by association with you, so I appreciate that.